You know, I have tried to inject some humor into this sermon that I prepared, and I woke up this morning feeling that that wasn't quite right, though since I prepared it, I'm sure to give it. And I had this problem because of the violence that we've seen in this country, and I just felt I needed to mention it this morning. It's occurred at an ever-increasing rate over the past years. Goes back to a song some of you are old enough to remember, which is, When Will We Ever Learn? Anyway, good morning. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, I think I got it. I'm going to start with a request, a comment, and a disclaimer. First, a request, which I think you've already begun to follow, which is that any of you who can't hear me, wave your hands and I'll try to do better. Secondly, as noted in the order of service this month, the services are to be given about creativity. The only thing creative about this particular presentation is that I was chosen to give it. Thirdly, a disclaimer. No part of this sermon or any of its faults are the product of artificial intelligence. Now, the title of this sermon includes the word aphorism, so I want you to remember the definition. If you consult the dictionary, you'll find aphorism. It lies midway between aphid and aphrodisiac. Could I have the first picture, please? And so it should. For an aphorism is a small, trenchant, working statement that excites our fancy. To quote Merriam's dictionary, an aphorism is a terse formulation of a truth or sentiment. One of my favorites is, you're allowed to make mistakes, but it is to your credit to make a different one each time. Now, you can learn a lot from aphorisms, though I think a flash of enjoyment is what draws me to them. Speaks poorly of aphorisms or of me, but anyway, needn't dwell on that. What caught my attention was a letter a long time ago to the New York Times Magazine. The letter to the editor dealt with aphorisms. It pointed out that many a commonplace bit of wisdom has its equally regarded opposite. There are a few of these I came up with. They're not perfect opposites, but each challenges the other. Maybe if I give you one, you can come up with an opposite one. Try this one. He who hesitates is lost. Anybody got an opposite for that? Haste makes waste. Or another way to put that is act in haste, repent at leisure. Another one, let's try. Two heads are better than one. Too many cooks spoil the broth, or its opposite, which is if you want to do it right, better do it yourself. How about all's well that ends well? The end justifies the means. It does not justify the means, excuse me. And then one other, just because I have it here. Forgive and forget. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So if what seems like wisdom meets its match, what are we going to do about that? You can make a lot out of this, or you can make very little. Can I have the next slide? So aphorisms are advice, and they serve as guide to actions, but are they rules to live by? How do you choose between them? This is a problem. And just as aphorisms abound, just as contradictions abound in our aphorism, there are some even in our principles. And opposing binaries pervade our language and our thinking. In doing so, they compete. They compete to form our view of the world. And, there's good and evil, there's rest and motion, night and day, young and old, work and play, you and I. You remember these in exams in grade school or sometime afterwards? Thinking in binary terms is comfortable. Who wants more? Just say yes, just say no. Issues are often presented to us in this convenient one or the other form. Don't have to think too much. It's been developed into an art form by many politicians, lawyers, and broadcasters. Choose between two alternatives. And we often do this to ourselves. It's kind of a pun. We often do this to, TWO, ourselves. We often do this to, TO, ourselves. And then there's also the TOO version. Of course, things are more complicated. As the theist Martin Buber pointed out, even individual words used in isolation contain an inherent binary view of the world, dividing it in two. So thinking about binary issues brings back a ditty I heard as a child. Can I have the next slide? Went like this. Some say that I am either or are, yet I am both and. I am neither nor. And you can dissect this, and either or is maybe the simplest. It makes fundamentalism, whether liberal or conservative, simplistic and divisive. The fundamentalist vow is clear: let no one join together those whom we have cast asunder. Such thinking deeply subverts our innate impulse, an impulse to love and to honor human dignity. How we let ourselves or others divide the world with language that determines attitudes we adopt, the conclusions we reach, who is us and who is them, dividing everyone into us and them all too often means either you're with us or we are against you. As you use, we promote the democratic process as a working means of reconciling our differences. What about the rest of the rhyme? Both and, neither nor? Three possibilities come to mind: compromise, transformation, and complementarity. The first is compromise, combines elements of both. Something's lost, something's gained. Hopefully there's a net improvement. The second is transformation. Can I have the next slide? It's a version of the Buddhist middle way. Blue and red make purple. This is both and converted into something neither nor, something totally new. The last both and binary I mentioned has been a banner on the wall of our church in the past. It's the yin and yang, a Chinese symbol combining two identical shapes of opposite shades, black and white, joined in an embrace. Please show me the next slide. Well, the classical Chinese tradition sees these as alternating. I see them in harmony. Neither is changed by the presence of the other. Each retains its overall similarity to the other while also maintaining its difference. Yet together, they add rather than subtract from one another. The whole is greater than its parts. It is a both and with a capital B and a capital A. And notice that in these symbols, there's a bit of the opposite within them. A white circle within yin and a black one within yang. There is not only complementarity, but admixture, an element of reciprocity, of mutual incorporation, another dimension of both and. Each both complements and contributes to the other. Now, I think I have left some of you thinking that I've become a bit didactic. I said didactic, a word that makes you think you're in a classroom, not in a church. I think that I'm making sort of the same kind of mistake each time. So I'll try to change and make a different one each time. And so I'm going to make a transition to our principles. Our principles guide us, and like aphorisms and binaries, they contain some paradox of their own. But just because there's another point of view, compromise should not be an automatic choice, even though discussion should be. Any of this can be a problem, and sometimes a delight. Our religion fundamentally, in its beliefs, in its 7 principles, only addresses life, not death. Can I have the next slide? Our principles offer a breadth that is universal. They include concerns about the relationship of human beings to each other and to the world we inhabit. And in doing so, they provide the why we do of religious belief and concern. In addition, our principles, especially the 4th and 5th, include statements providing a basis for how this should be accomplished by each of us individually and in community. In their combination, the words our principles offer are in life, in a personal sense of ethics, purpose, and fulfillment that is its own affirmation and reward, independent of any beliefs in life's hereafter. In my view, our principles are not laws of nature. They are guides of proven, but not inevitable worth. As the Reverend Desmond Daly has emphasized to us, our principles are not commandments. I interpret what Desmond had to say to mean that our principles provide both starting points and continuing guidance. But I do think that they contain a command, an underlying one encouraged by our 4th principle, the unspoken command to decide, to think, and to act accordingly. The ultimate judgment one must make for oneself whether and how to apply each principle, because one can surely find an exception. To me, deciding is being principled, and inevitably, at times, one is wrong. That's part of why one is admonished to walk humbly with one's God and with each other, and I would add especially with one's spouse and significant other. When asked what we use are about, and I suspect most of you, refer to our principles. When we talk to others, I also assume that you, like I, leave something out when you try to explain our faith to others. We leave out the words we affirm and promote. These are important. They state that our principles are a commitment, not a command, a commitment given freely by each of us. There is no mention of greater authority governing this process. This leaves us fueled by hope and aspiration, and without fear of condemnation. That responsibility is to ourselves and to each other. Depending upon the circumstance, we may even deny that a principle that seems to be is really applicable. Let me talk about this. I'm a bit embarrassed to say this, but I think what we need here is an aphorism, I like one of Judy's. My wife's aphorism is, do whatever makes your stomach feel comfortable. I interpret this as saying, reason with your mind, much as you can, but then ultimately you have to listen to your gut. That you have to make decisions and do things that allow you to sleep at night. That you have within you the ability to be principled. To put it less viscerally, you have to engage your soul along with your thoughts. You have to reconcile your experience and your projection of an outcome with your principles. And with a view to the good. It's ultimately a question of being honest with yourself. Think of it as putting your soul to rest, and perhaps on fire at the same time. So what are some of the other ways in which the issues of uncertainty and contradiction find a home in Unitarian Universalism? I think our principles contain a few paradoxes that in some respects they're problematic. But I want to be clear, sort of personal disclosure, this is not a statement in favor of the bylaws revision that is to be voted upon at General Assembly. The proposed revision seems flawed to me, despite its intentions. Religious intention should be the result of belief rather than replacing it. Nor is a list of purely abstract and intangible values a substitute. I believe our existing principles have substance and should not be submerged or subordinated to a limited list of goals, no matter how worthy. This is not an argument to deny the bitterness and deprivation of racism or any other form of injustice. It is an argument to confirm and preserve the basic moral starting points by which we commit to peace, planetary welfare, mutual respect, and the elimination of injustice in all its forms. I'm also concerned that lurking alongside and within this debate is a feeling that the bond between the UUA and our members and congregations is weakening, that we have lost some of our both and, that we've begun to enter a limbo of frustration with elements of either or and of neither nor. And though this process involves us intimately, it is proceeding at a remove from each and all of us, that we are only communicating at the broad, formal remove of internet pronouncements, our UU journal, and official gatherings. That can make differences foster division rather than generating empathy, understanding, and mutual endeavor. Perhaps there's some way we can designate representatives to establish a more direct, person-to-person communication that might strengthen healthy relationship. This might establish a deeper and continued dialogue with direct feedback to members and leaders of their parent organizations. In turn, this might strengthen trust by establishing an increasingly free and informed dialogue in both directions. Sorry, just had to say all this. Let me go back to where I left off. Our principles are simple statements of complex issues, and taken together, they have the virtue of being comprehensive. But they are not without paradox, and some are open to contradiction. Several can be a bit of a wrestling match. Take our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. What about Nero? What about Hitler? This principle seems to ask that it be questioned, even contradicted. Maybe it would be better to formulate it in terms such as acceptance and appreciation of human worth and dignity in all its forms. Regardless, it still leaves us opposing some people, their views, and their activity. And when we do so, we face the difficult decision of whether and when to cease opposition, and if so, to decide whether and how to begin forgiveness. In turn, we face a parallel challenge from the unmodified endorsement of compassion in our second principle. These are problems. We need to think. Our fifth principle is also often open to contradiction. It affirms the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. But personal reflection and conviction does not always coincide with communal opinion. So our principles are not perfect, but we've judged them to be good, and we have joined this church. They were revised in 1985. They'll no doubt be refined further at some time in the future, but I, at least momentarily, emphasize refined, not necessarily replaced. And even if they're unchanged, we can approach them for what they are, not commandments, but guides that require us to think. And so it's not entirely unfortunate, and perhaps even unavoidable, that one or another of them contains at least a smidgen of perversity. It's provoking, it makes us think. The ultimate paradox within our principle is a single element. All the others depend on it. It's the one that allows us to maintain change and choose how to pursue any and all of the principles. It governs all the rest, and it also governs itself. It offers us free rein in its exercise, and doing so allows us the possibility of using it to abolish itself. This is the democratic process. It gives us the ability to give it away, deny ourselves the right to use it. We can vote it out of existence by giving the authority to those willing to end it. There are obvious examples. Look back at Hitler's Germany. Look at many of the autocracies that currently exist or seem about to be born. To my way of thinking, the integrity of the democratic process is central to our principles. It is the essential element that determines whether this religion or any religion so conceived can both endure and prosper. Accepting our principles, finding them compatible with your sense of how you have and hope to view life, forms the basis for joining this church. Doing so offers a degree of personal freedom that's sometimes challenging to cohesive efforts and mutual responsibility. But it is the reciprocal respect for one another expressed in our first three principles that offers the will and the stimulus to move forward, and is the path to mutual effort offered by our fifth principle, authorizing the democratic process that offers us the collective means to do so. Finally, I would like to point out that our principles contain no negative statements. There is no "thou shalt not." While there are negatives implicit in any and maybe all positives, this lack of explicit negatives sets the tone that affirms the aim of our faith. It provides us with a spirit that strengthens us as we center upon helping to make the world better. Thank you.